Now we're going to transition into the second part of the discussion where we're going to be talking about damage control because your boarding team, the boarders in this scenario, maybe you're on an Idris or a Javelin and you have been boarded during a battle and you have repelled the boarders but they've caused all sorts of um, havoc and chaos on your ship and you're trying to get your ship back into the fight, because the fight isn't over. And so what we are thinking is that Tira and I would go down and we would, sort of, instead of me, asking these two questions, we would ask Nightcop, questions about how damage control might, theoretically, especially from a thinking about it strategically, and how you might go about doing damage control on your ship in order to get minimize the damage, minimize injuries, and get back underway, get in the fight. And so the first question is, Nightcop, what if you're in this hypothetical scenario on a larger ship? What are your what would be the priorities for damage control on board your ship after you've been boarded? You've taken a bunch of damage and such, in the fight.
So number one priority on a ship, especially a submarine with the limited atmosphere and the hostile environment immediately outside. So there's really essentially no safe place to go, is fire. Above all others, if you have multiple casualties occurring with regards to the ship, fire is paramount. Fire is going to be the most likely thing to kill you. It's going to eat all your atmosphere. It's going to burn critical components. And it's going to rapidly fill a space with smoke and obstruct vision and basically prevent any further casualty response. Because the moment you start losing the ability to see, you really start losing the ability to fight. So fire wins above all others for the most part.
An RPG standpoint, I like to think of the fire damage that CIG has shown us as sort of like you have inflicted bleeding, you're going to continue to bleed until you do something about it.
Yeah, and the crazy thing about fire is, like, if you want to continue with that analogy, like, it's slightly different in that, if I just give you a cut on your arm, a small cut on your arm, that doesn't immediately transition to a life-threatening injury. Whereas fire propagates so quickly that it only takes minutes before you've lost the ship and you've lost the space. Or lost the space and then lost the ship, excuse me, other way around. But I mean, that's all it takes.
And in Star Citizen, medical injuries aren't necessarily as critical either.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you could take a gunshot and just be like, med pen. Okay, fight the fire.
Yeah. Well, we're all hoping that one day Tree gets a little more in-depth gameplay for the medical stuff.
It's going to be a thing.
Yes, I agree with you.
I'm going to do a video for it.
Yeah.
So you have 6 different drugs you can give us.
Yeah. What more do you want, Tree?
My sweet summer child. 6 different drugs. You know who has 6 different drugs? An emergency medical responder, like the very basic, most absolute basic person, doing first aid.
Look, Tree's not going to be happy till he's intubating people. Okay.
Yeah.
Like
you don't want to see every capability that I have. But there's
the problem is
tangent. Ways to game.
Yeah. Sorry. I just don't want you devolving to the point where you're handing out foot fungus cream to the standard crew on a ship, like we see in regular.
Checking your hydration status. Everybody head to the bathroom. We're gonna watch you pee. Make sure you're peeing clear.
Oh boy, you're gonna
sounds
be
like a Marine thing.
I was gonna say, oh,
yeah, yes, it's definitely a Marine thing.
He'll be handing out moleskin for our worn out feet, though.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so fire, you say, is the number one. I would assume then, based on our notes, although I don't know who put this together, hull integrity is your second most problematic issue, especially for something like a submarine.
Yes, and that would be the thing that competes with fire. So, for us, right? Obviously, it's flooding would be the largest concern there, and
which gets rid of the fire.
It also causes fires. So here's the truth of flooding. I mean, bottom line is all seawater penetrations into a hull have flood control actuation valves. that are all linked to control stations that you can shut, and it immediately shuts all access points for the seawater into the ship. The problem is, though, like you said, once the water's into the ship, water and electrical components really don't work all that well together, and it has a tendency to cause fires. Now you may have solved the immediate problem of the flooding, but now you also have a fire to deal with. So I could see it being a similar thing in a space-like environment, with things like boarding actions, breachings, explosive decompression, battle damage. Maybe you've solved the problem of the hull breach, but you have a lot of now secondary problems. Now that you're not venting atmosphere and you have oxygen for the fire to eat, potentially, depending on the space and the nature of the damage, now you've got to deal with secondary fires.
Yeah, I think this goes back. It's interesting. This goes back to the moment you enter into a potential risky situation. Everybody should have a vac suit and helmet on.
I'm telling you, man, we're gonna be treating this game like The Expanse. It's the smartest play,
right? And that doesn't mean that you're always doing it, because one of my org mates, Salty, he loves to freaking walk around his ship in civilian clothes and look at me.
And that's great if you're not going into combat.
Right. Well, he's living on the edge because it's Star Citizen. I mean, you could just die. But yeah, so you could, in theory, to get rid of fire, in theory. Not all fire, but I think most fire that we would encounter, right, is just vent the room.
Yeah. The moment you take you take the fuel, you either take, there's the fire tetrahedron. No, there's Ghost Dog, guys. The fire tetrahedron, right? Like, yeah, right. she might show up later. You've got, oxygen. You need oxygen for fire to burn. You need a fuel, so a combustible substance, or whether it's hydraulic fluid or whatever, something with a flash point. And then in some cases, yes, you can replace with certain metals, magnesium flares and ammo and all that kind of stuff. Sorry, she's upset about somebody walking by. And all
she's like, "What's on fire? So, there's a fire?"
Yeah, I know, right? And then there's the chemical reaction itself of these components. So if you take one out of the chain, then you can keep fire from being a thing. Ideally, that would be the easiest one to be.
I'm only one responsible one here. All my whole family's in bed. And we got Ghost Dog and a baby and all kinds of stuff.
I know. I'll deal with her in a second. I'll see if I can get her in a minute. She wants, the problem is she's like, I want to be on the screen, and stuff like that. But there she's calmed down. There we go. She calmed down. Anyway, so that'd be the idea. The easiest thing to do is set yourself up. She's killing me. Set yourself up for vacuum. And then if you're in vacuum, then you don't have to worry about fire starting, or at least you very much reduce the risk.
Yeah.
All right. Excuse me for just a second. Y'all continue. I will catch up in just a second.
When he brings up, I was a firefighter for years after getting out of the Marines, before I just went full medicine. But he brings up a point where, and the question is, how granular does CIG get with fire? Because there can be electrical fires that will burn without oxygen.
Oxygen, yeah.
Yeah, and certain material.
I mean, you
fires.
throw a white phosphorus grenade. I don't think white phosphorus needs oxygen either.
Nope.
And those are handhelds that you can throw. I've thrown them. They're fun.
Oh gosh, I can't. Throwing Willie Pete grenade into a room.
Really. It was not into a room, but I ran.
Oh,
really
there's
fast.
Ghost Dog. Hi, Ghost Dog. Yeah, no, that's a war crime right there. Throwing Willie Pete into an occupied room.
No, I don't think it is, but whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't an occupied room. Anyway, but yeah, no, I think they're gonna have, at least in the first release, you'll have to have some type of airflow, pressurization. But what I would like to see is, with the release of fire, is the ability to have a panel where you can go in and shut off your airflow, right, and then vent the ship.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
maybe
and-
not
Yeah.
every ship can do that, but
Well, and
Right,
it isn't
'cause
going to be
not
like a flip of a switch too. It's like, okay, we're going to initiate this process, but the life support is a system. And so imagine if your life support component is damaged. Does that make it so not only can you not restore, atmosphere to a room, but you also can't vent the atmosphere from a room? Are you up a creek without a paddle at that point? That's something that if you haven't been boarded, you're in the fight. You're Night Cobb the engineer, even though you don't want to be the engineer, but you are Night Cobb the engineer, and you have taken damage during the fight, and everybody, maybe you've prepared for combat. You vented your ship already. Well, you lose your life support component. You can't restore that, and your suits are going to have limited oxygen capacity. You can only survive in that suit, for a limited amount of time, and obviously. Ghost, that was perfectly timed. Thank you.
Yeah, well done.
But that's something, a really interesting consideration, along with the whole integrity part is, you have, sweet, you've lost hull integrity, the atmosphere, or you pumped out your atmosphere in the first place. You can pump fix the holes in your ship, but now you're running on stored air, and you're like, okay, how
Yeah.
quickly can we get the
Eventually you
system
need it
back up
back.
and running?
well, right now
Yeah.
we have like an hour of air though.
Yeah.
Unless they're gonna drastically reduce
but
that, which I don't think they are.
Oh,
Did you
I
notice that it
guarantee
goes
you,
down faster when you're injured, though?
yeah, I guarantee you
I didn't.
that will
That's pretty good.
scale, and it
Along
will
with
be
like
based
thirst
off of
and stuff
it'll be
like
based
that.
off of your suit. Because if you
Sure, that makes sense that certain suits would be better than others, but
Yeah.
but don't equip shitty suits in your ship.
Mhm. But that's
Well,
that's
this goes
a
down to
cost
like
benefit.
preparedness, though.
Yeah,
It's a
well,
cost
it
benefit
comes down
thing.
to the planning.
Yeah.
Yeah, but flight suits
if
are
you're
expendable, right?
if you're fighting
So-
a boarding action, and okay, now you can't, you have a limited air supply, as part of that suit because it's meant for combat and not meant for EVA and working in vacuum. Those are choices
And
you're going to have to make.
I would argue that's a flawed argument because combat is one of the most long and grueling things you'll ever get involved in on the ground.
Well, I'm
So
aware.
You
But,
wouldn't you wouldn't that you would have the most oxygen available, right, in a given suit. Maybe not for like EVA repairs, that might like an industrial suit, but I mean I think of the suits available, it would be like an industrial suit and then a military suit.
Yeah,
Right. So
I think that they
because
are going to make you make those decisions and
sure,
have,
and maybe an
Yeah.
industrial suit you can't put certain armors on over it or something like that, and that's fine. But I mean, plus we already got oxypens, so you just have to carry oxypens and continue to inject yourself with air.
And that's
So-
preparedness, though. If you don't have
Yeah.
those resources available, I mean, I don't know about you guys. How often do you have an oxypen on you?
well, and
Never.
you can only carry so many,
Exactly.
and it's
Exactly.
it's an oxygen
you could
pen,
put-
not an air pen.
Yeah, I
So-
know. We get it, Tree. Look, man, you're just looking at
It is
using beams for oxygen, all right?
70 whatever percent nitrogen, whatever percent oxygen.
Yeah.
It's an air pen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an air pen. Yeah, it's not going to give you an embolism. This is a special one. You just put it right in your vein.
I would even imagine that it's not even something to be injected into you. It goes into your suit,
Yeah.
right?
You're refilling.
It's not like
Yeah.
the med pen where you're spearing
There you go.
yourself.
It's an animation problem. It's an animation problem.
Yeah, exactly. They use the same
Jamming it into
animation.
your leg or your arm.
That's one thing I've been hoping for, is that you will have ports built into your suit or your armor.
Oh,
where
you just
this is a port for medication. This
Yeah.
is a port for
Yeah,
restoring
sure.
your oxygen supply.
I think
that sort
that'll
of thing.
come down to the simple fact that this is a game and
Mhm.
they've already got animations. And I know that they add animations all the time. I think that is probably the least necessary animation, right? I mean, it works well. I mean,
Does it though?
It's
Oh, that's right.
It's
Somebody brought
really
up liquid
old.
oxygen. Tree. You remember The Abyss? You watched The Abyss?
Oh yeah.
Where he puts on the mask and he fills it up with water, and it's actually like a way for him to breathe longer. And not only that, but not face like the pressure. Yeah.
all
Anyway,
right. So let's get back on topic here. Right.
So
okay.
we talked about fire and why fire is so important, and then
We
hull
talked about
integrity
hull
is
integrity.
is
How
up
easy
there.
is it for you to do something outside the ship?
and a submarine.
Well, I mean, do you have to surface every time, or do you have water locks that you could send a diver out at certain depths to go do something, or to do something? Like if you're in a wartime environment, you don't want to surface completely. Is there a means to get someone outside of the ship?
Sure is.
Or yes,
yeah.
okay.
Yes. Well, we have what they call lockout chambers, and you guys can research it. There's videos on it. Specifically, there are a few submarines that are equipped with those lockout chambers, and then not only that, but like diver recovery, dedicated. I'm trying to think where I want to stray with this. Service trunks, where you can deploy and recover special operations forces and or divers at certain depths. You're right, it's depth limited, because ultimately, right, you get too deep, and it's a non-zero game on that one.
Of course.
So that does exist. I don't know how. I mean, obviously, you can relate it to Star Citizen and what we have now with how easy it is to
Walk out of
EVA.
your ship. Yeah.
But I imagine they're going to bring depth to that system once they kind of get real about the whole. And you kind of seen it. I don't know if you guys have noticed, even in 317, if you go into an airlock sometimes on a planet with like relatively low atmosphere or close to vacuum, and you try and cycle the airlock with the door still open, it'll eject you. Like
You can cycle an airlock with the door open?
I've
I thought
noticed
it automatically
like a
closed it
lag.
and then it rotates. Doesn't it?
I think some of the little structures on planets sometimes will try and cycle with one of the doors still open, and it'll eject you. You see it too with trying to go into a ship with an open hangar, and you'll like run into the ship, and as soon as you get to the point where you think pretty much like atmosphere is present, it like shoots you backwards. You guys not had that?
Never experienced that.
No, I mean,
Oh my god, I got video of it.
Hey, go check out Night Gob's YouTube channel.
No, I don't think. I mean, like, I don't think I've actually put the video of it on YouTube, but
coming soon.
Anyway, you'll have to trust me. But I mean, like, that's the idea. Is you need that moment of explosive decompression to really drive home that you need to establish slowly a pressure difference when you're transitioning to vacuum, ideally to deploy somebody. Because bottom line is like lockout chambers and everything, airlocks, they all function on the same purpose. It's like, I'm going to slowly, change the environment so that when I open the door on the other side, there's not a gross pressure differential that will immediately shoot you out into space uncontrolled, or potentially injure you. And we have that problem actually internally on submarines sometimes, where it's like you have hatches that separate compartments. And if there's a pressure differential between the compartment and you don't equalize that pressure differential, it doesn't actually take much. 4 or 5 pounds, and you open a door, and you might be shooting through that door, as a adult human being, and only 4 or 5 pounds of pressure difference. Because when you take that 5 pounds and you magnify it across an entire compartment, like, it's a big deal. So
There you go.
Like that has to become, and I think it will be. I think obviously you see the videos of like how they now do life support and transition pressure, temperature and stuff. You open a door in one space, it obviously, that atmosphere in the one room transitions into the next at a reasonable rate based on the volume of the two spaces. They're obviously taking these things into account. So ultimately, I think what you are going to see is, you want to deploy forces into space, you better have an airlock that cycles. Otherwise, you're about to eject them into space and execute. And it might be good, or it might stop. Yeah, if they can stop.
So that goes back to is the pressure differential managed via the life support, or is
I
there
think
another
that's.
system on board?
I
Within
mean,
an airlock or just in rooms?
Well, you were talking about rooms on a submarine can have slightly different pressure differential
yep.
that can ruin your day if you're not aware of it. So, not that I think CIG is going to give us that type of shenaniganry,
No, I
but
don't expect that to be a thing internal to the ship
but
as a
is that
causality.
just for people, who may or may not have an interest in this? Is it a life support function, or is it some other system function?
So ultimately it boils. I mean, if you couple systems like ventilation, which in some cases is life support, and in some cases is more akin to equipment support.
Okay.
Things like ventilation and some supporting systems for life support are ultimately, yes, how you balance the
It's
equation.
all one system of systems that have to balance to equalize pressure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the problem is that difference in pressure is a causality of like sometimes normal ship operations. Um, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here. Ultimately, right, if you generate atmosphere in an environment and you have other things like, high pressure air reserves is a big thing in a submarine because high pressure air, you feed into high pressure hydraulics as a mode of pressure and force and movement of a pressurized liquid and stuff like that. So it can operate hydraulically operated control surfaces and everything like that. Well, you have to get that high pressure air from somewhere. So you have to take suction. You can't take suction externally. There's no immediate air volume outside of a submarine when you're submerged. So you have to take it internally. Now I'm drawing a vacuum in whatever space I'm taking a suction on. It's a slow vacuum. And it's something that I will occasionally have to equalize pressure across compartments. So there's things you do to mitigate these things. But I mean, that's outside the scope of what Star Citizen is going
There
to
you
do.
go, CIG. This is it.
So getting back to the priorities, we talked about why fire is, in general, number one. And close second to that is hull integrity. Regarding the ones that we came up with afterwards, restoring power, restoring life support, restoring
Yeah.
other ship functions, where would you've put out the fire, and
Power's next.
the power, restoring power to now. Let's say your ship is without power. Are you you don't have your power plant up, but you're running on battery backups. Is your priority still getting the power plant back up and running, even though you have backup
Yes.
power? Yeah.
Yes. Because backup power is not sustainable long term.
Yeah.
And in most scenarios, and if they do this the right way, in my opinion, right, in most scenarios, you're very limited on that reserve. And the idea is, so I'll give you guys the acronym that we use in engineering on a submarine.
We love acronyms. We all three of us love acronyms.
Simple one. So it's our list of priorities in terms of casualty response with regards to engineering related casualties, and it's PIFA. Now, I'm going to kill the first one because I don't think it matters as much in space as it does for a submarine, because like we kind of talked about this pre-stream, but propulsion is necessary on a submarine, because if you don't have propulsion, you're sinking. So if you don't have propulsion, you're just dead. You will sink out, you'll reach crush depth, and you'll be dead. So propulsion is actually the first thing that we care about in terms of restoration of priorities. But the immediate next one, E, is electrical power. Because if I don't have electrical power, I can't actually continue down the chain of priorities. But ultimately, the two following it, their feed and air conditioning, honestly, you don't need to worry about those. Essentially, those are supporting loads. And we can go into like the idea of like life support and stuff like that beyond that.
Well, especially because if you're in a ship,
feed and what?
Air conditioning.
So is that's feeding air?
No, feed is something different, but I can't talk about what it means.
well, no, but you bring up a point though. If you have a ship with multiple power plants, and okay, one is completely gone, the other one is salvageable, you can get it back up and running, and then okay, you've restored partial power to the ship, and then you're having to manage what things to bring back online in order to not overwhelm your power plant, that you have left.
Yeah.
That's a very realistic scenario that we could be talking about, because that can happen.
This is
I'll give
why
you the
I
substitute for feed because I know it's going to bother a tier real bad, and
It
you and I
is.
can talk offline later.
yes.
The substitute would be equivalent in a Star Citizen world would be, okay, I need power back. Immediately following that, I need cooling, but I need power to operate my coolers. So I don't get one
Okay.
without the other. So power comes back first, and then coolers come back second. Following that, and I used air conditioning, and the only reason that I say air conditioning, a lot of people be like, that doesn't seem like a really prioritized load. Why is that even in your list? Bottom line is that would kind of fall in the Star Citizen equivalent of a cooler. Every piece of equipment, electrical equipment, generates heat. And if it generates too much heat, it stops working appropriately. It melts, resistors, conductors, everything start to fail. Or if humidity just gets too high in a space, right? Then moisture forms, condensation, and water does not react well with electronics.
People also don't react well.
Exactly. And that would be the other part of that. So bottom line is really it boils down to electrical power, cooling for said electrical power, and then life support systems would be my list of priorities in Star Citizen.
So you're in Star Citizen, your power plant, you said your power plant, your so restoring
Coolers.
your power plant and then making sure your coolers are up and functioning, and then
Yep.
life support following that.
Yeah.
And then if you let's say you are we're in an Idris, and we all should be fairly familiar with, not really the layout, but the various functions of the Idris. You've restored you restored power and your ability to, your coolers, in this instance, and life support. Where are you routing power to first? If you have had interruptions within your power grid, your relay system, what areas of the ship do you want to make sure have power first and foremost? For you on a submarine, what would that look like, and how do we apply that to a ship in Star Citizen?
Propulsion systems.
Propulsion. Okay, so getting
because bottom line is you can't. Yeah, if you can move, if you can get somewhere to either receive help or get yourself out of a bad situation, right? Like I use the idea of, okay, I've got these three things back. I can continue to fight whatever other casualties develop. My main concern would be, can I move the ship out of harm's way if I need to? If I can't,
can I get into quantum?
That would be, and that's kind of falls in with propulsion. But I mean, you may need just be like, can I get basic engine power to keep myself from careening into the asteroid that I'm, nearby? Or if you're falling out of orbit and you're getting ready to crash into the planet, that's a whole other thing,
we know that's maybe definitely a thing in Star Citizen too. Yeah,
exactly.
One of Paul Astropub's favorite things is talking about.
So that's when we divert to propulsion.
Yeah. Okay, so
this is
power back to the engines.
But this is also why, if I can pause, this is why I think the Carrack is gonna continually be the go-to ship for exploration versus the new one, and I can never remember what the new one's called.
The Odyssey.
The Odyssey, because the Odyssey has a capital class power plant, which requires, they've said, basically dry dock to replace.
Yep.
Whereas
you can
level 1, 2s, and 3s you can replace internally if you have one. So if you're going out into the black for a protracted period of time, you can put a couple of extra power plants in your hold and then take them to engineering if you get yourself in trouble.
Yeah.
And replace them. And probably
if it goes that badly, you can full on
if it goes that badly, you can replace the car. Right. And whereas you're not going to be able to do that with that capital class exploration ship.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
but that applies to your, people talk about how, oh, well, I have an Idris, I have a Javelin, the whole.
It applies to all of them.
Yeah. And any capital class ship, that's you have more power, but that's also a vulnerability because
It is.
some of them have some, and I can never remember what has what, but if you don't have significant redundancy, you could be up a creek without a paddle. And Night
Yep.
Cobb could be just an absolute wizard engineer, but if your power plant is toast to toast, you can't get it back up and running, you're really in a bad way. But I like how you were talking about how getting power back to propulsion first and foremost, because that's if we're using our Idris analogy, the Idris has the multiple thrusters mounted on the side, and you're going to you have to, those ships are going to have, power conduits, however, it ends up working, the relay system, um, in order to get power to those thrusters. That it's not like the power plant is right next to the engine, which is right in front of the thrusters,
Yeah.
which is actually, like you were talking about, a tier, an advantage kind of something like the Carrack. The main thrusters are directly behind engineering. So you don't have this pathway to your main thrusters to get them back going. It's a very short distance, from your power plant to get power back to those main thrusters. Maneuvering,
Just don't crawl into that crawl space because it will eject you into space.
yeah, right where the thrusters are, melt. Um, but yeah,
No,
that's something that
there's a gap in the mesh right now,
ah,
and
okay.
the power plant doesn't fill the whole area, and so if you crawl into there, it'll just poop you out the back.
But that's a ship design thing where you
Yeah.
you may have some serious challenges getting power rerouted back to those thrusters that are a distance away from wherever your power plants are, in order to restore propulsion and maneuverability, because it propulsion, like you said, but also you have all sorts of maneuvering thrusters all over the ship. And so you could have, based off of how challenging it is to restore power to various areas, you may have a significant challenge restoring maneuverability. You may be able to just, only have two lateral thrusters and go left and right and have very little otherwise attitude control, but at least you can go in a straight line and maybe get away, or try and get away, put some distance between you and whatever the threat is. But that's something that's really interesting to think about. Um, so we have talked about restoring power and getting power back to your propulsion and maneuvering systems. Um, and then where would you go from that? You talked about life support and other ship functions. What would come after restoring power? Are you going to try, get shields back up and running? Weapons. What other things do we have?
So that boils down to how deep they go. Right now, like, functionally, the only thing that you really lose, in certain distortion events is, okay, like you said, engines, thrusters, shields, and weapon emplacements. But the things that I would be ultimately concerned with, and I know they have physicalized components for on some ships, are, okay, navigation system
Mm-hmm.
and radar.
Because you got to be able to see where you're
In
going.
my mind, these things come before shields and weapons. And don't get me wrong, like, obviously there might be a little bit. I think beyond propulsion, it gets a little bit more, choose your fate based on the circumstances that you're in, and it might dictate your priorities, and that's fine. That's totally fine if that's how it works at that particular point in time. But I think you need those bare minimums before you actually start addressing things like shields and weapons are going to be one of the last things on my list, depending
Mhm.
on the situation. If I'm in combat, yes, but ultimately, how effective in combat are you if you don't have navigation systems, targeting systems online? The basic necessities of your flight control systems, if they don't exist, they aren't functioning, they don't have power, then you are essentially a free floating target. Maybe you've got propulsion and you've got a little bit of movement on your side, but now you're a moving target, but you're not effective in combat. So it's the support systems, and ultimately you end with, okay, now I'm ready to re-engage shields, and then weapons would be my last thing. If you're that hurt and you're in casualty damage mode, you're not good in a fight. Your first priority should be getting out of the way of the fight, in my opinion. You guys are the combat experts, though.
No,
So
that's really logical, and that's why I wanted to have this conversation, because that would not have been my first thought. And it's like, it's the same thing you know,
And that's not necessarily a ground pounder perspective either.
yeah,
Like I
from a
can
ground,
understand if you're in a ship formation and you can't move and you get power back, you would want to clear the fight so that
Yeah,
your larger fleet could continue to maneuver. Because right now you're just a navigation hazard.
yeah,
exactly.
Whereas,
You're a risk to yourself and everyone else.
hmm
yeah. Whereas for
you don't
a
want to
ground
fly your
pounder,
Idris into the line of fire of your javelin, who's trying to take out, whoever has been attacking you. Yeah,
yeah, that's a different perspective, I think, than
that's actually,
what I would take. But that makes sense.
yeah, no, I really like that. It's a really good point. It's just kind of funny because it, I didn't immediately think about that, but the game that I've been playing that came up in my episode description before I changed it because I'm a moron. Um, I do that all the time in that game. Is if there's a disabled ship, like an enemy ship, I will use that Hulk as cover for my ship and maneuver
Yep.
around it in order to fire and then go back in there. Vent, in this game they call it flux, but essentially, you know, uh, yeah, that's if you're a navigation hazard, that's something that you know if you bump into another ship, you can cause significant damage to your friendlies. You can interrupt their line of fire. You totally throw a giant, you're a giant monkey wrench in the plan
Yeah, you're a
of,
liability at that point in time.
yeah. And um it's kind of like a casualty evacuation on the ground in that we need to get them out of the way and out of the rear because they're a distraction. They're not combat effective. You're bleeding out on the floor, and we can't have you sitting up there with the rest of the guys who are still in the fight screaming bloody murder because you're a distraction. And yeah, you might be a hazard, like if you're in a hallway, of people trying to get past you. But that's one of the
Yep.
main things as a medic for me is go get once we have superior fire superiority, go in there and get them and pull them back out of the fight, get them into cover, so that way for those reasons. But I wouldn't have
Yep.
immediately applied that logic, even though I do that in game a lot, but it makes a lot of sense. So we talked about fire, hull integrity, restoring power, maneuverability, and then uh, navigation, and you said like sensors or visibility, so you can
Yeah.
see where you're going, because you can't always rely on just the your screen, your window in front of you.
You're not going to be able to jump away and clear the fight
Yep.
if you
Mhm.
don't have sensors. So
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. You're going to have
yeah,
to be able to plot some sort of course, whether it's, if you're relating it to um, the new master modes, whether you're under standard power or quantum travel, one way or another, you have to have some sort of ability to do that. And you said that weapons and shields, is really the last priority. Hopefully your armor holds, and the people that are shooting you aren't trying to finish you off. But at the same time, if they're trying to finish you off in a larger battle, that's wasted firepower. If you can't
It
fight
is.
back, they should be targeting the other ships. Not trying to. Now, if you're the only target, well, then that sucks.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but that makes a lot of
yep.
sense too. Um, I think that sort of covers the priorities, and we talked about a lot about the tasks within those different priorities of what you would need to do in order to achieve those goals, those priorities.
Ooh.
Um, so from a sort of from a Navy perspective, and I always think about this because I remember witnessing the ships going to battle stations when I was on board, and watching the different teams going about doing their different things. And how do what's the process going into that of deciding who does what, and making sure that they know how to do that job and have the equipment to do that job. How does that go? In your experience, being on a sub, you can sort of extrapolate that to a bigger picture, bigger ship, and into Star Citizen.
Well, so first and foremost, everybody's trained and qualified damage control. It's part of your basic quals. So you go through a basic qualification, and then
Mhm.
you'll go through a more advanced qualification. In order to actually wear my warfare device, the submarine dolphins, I actually have to have achieved high levels of damage control qualification, amongst a general working knowledge of all the ship systems. And that usually takes about a year, based on the complexity of those systems and the training associated with the damage control. So there's that. So that's why I say, like, ultimately on the smaller ships, you're going to want, I mean, like, the really sweaty, high running crews are going to be all trained in damage control. They're all going to know how to use a fire extinguisher. They're all going to know how to do basic things like how do you vent the compartment, to either one, restore atmosphere, or B, get rid of it quickly, in pre-combat situations and stuff like that. And, ultimately it's a training piece at the beginning. Now, as to who goes where and does what when the actual casualty happens, we have things called watch quarter station bills. And it basically is these posted watch bills of, in the event of X casualty, these are the responsibilities. Now, they're broken down, and this isn't going to be probably how Star Citizen works, but they're broken down by, okay, are you the oncoming, offgoing, or you're the actual watchstander? These are your responsibilities. So if I'm, it's my turn, based on like a 3-shift period day, if it's my turn to be, pilot, if I'm offgoing pilot, then my responsibility is, potentially, you're the man in charge at the scene. If there's a fire in a space, you're the man in charge. So you're directing and coordinating all casualty efforts at the scene. But maybe the oncoming guy who is in the rack, sleepier, a little bit harder to wake up and get to the scene, he might take on a responsibility that that is afforded a little more time to get on station. So maybe he's like, a good example for us would be second hose team. He's the second full FFE, full gear for fighting a fire, a Scott SCBA on their back and all that kind of stuff. Takes time to dress out. You're the second team to go in. So you're the backup team, or something along those lines. Yeah. Yep, so there's a watch quarter station bill that basically designates what everybody's responsibilities would be. Now in Star Citizen, I would just expect it to be, because I do not expect crew rotations and shifts and stuff like that. You just need to have that identified of, okay, gunners, your priority is to get off the turrets and go grab fire extinguishers, and you're going to have to decide who the best persons for the job and the people that you can sacrifice from whatever their normal positions are to go fight. And me in my head, I say, because like we said, right, if you're into the major casualties, weapons are no longer your priority. Like, hopefully, they've disengaged from you because you're not a threat anymore. And it's a matter of you're just trying to save the ship. So gunners are coming off turrets.
Let me interrupt you. Is that how you... Yeah. So if you can elaborate on that, as far as the triaging, you're reverse triaging the ship's systems, and teams based off of, hey, we have like you say, casualties, not people casualties, but casualties as far as the ship, and you're reverse triaging people from different tasks based off of, hey, this isn't as important right now. We need you to do this damage control role. So if you can elaborate on that, you talked about weapons, but what would that sort of list look like, going down from who are the first people that you would pull off their normal job? You've got weapons. Where do you go from there as far as like a ship role?
So just to be clear, I mean, like, depends on the nature of your crew too and what your complement is. But like, I mean, obviously you've got some other options too prior to weapons. Maybe if it's mid combat and it's just a matter of addressing battle damage. Hopefully, ideally, the end world we all want to live in is, okay, I don't have every single person on my ship in a turret, in a pilot or co-pilot seat, or even in the captain's chair. I have some additional people that are like onboard security in case I get boarded, or, these are the troops that I, brought on board my Valkyrie that I'm getting ready to disposition to a hostile area. Well, guess what, guys? You're on the line now. Because ultimately I keep people in the stations of active crew members as long as I can until I have to pull from them. And then the triage becomes, weapons, engineers, easy, but I would immediately task them in any casualty scenario as you're the man in charge. Like, I don't want you actively picking up a fire extinguisher unless you have to. You are to direct and coordinate damage control efforts. And, maybe you can operate the terminals, adjust atmospheres and stuff like that. But ultimately, you might have to multitask a little bit there, but I don't want you being the person attacking the fire. Because if I lose the engineer to the fire, compounded my problems. Like, that was a crucial crew member in that scenario. And then the last person I'd probably pull from co-pilot's easy to pull out. Co-pilot would be next on my list too, with the gunners. Because most ships are only going to need the one pilot to fly. Pilot's probably going to sit there last with the captain. Those are going to be the last two that get pulled off station. And really, I pull the pilot only if he's lost all engines, all capability of controlling the craft. In which case, it's like, well, you're not doing any good in that chair, so get up and go fight.
I like it.
So that would be my mentality with the triage. Now, again, like I work in an environment where on the sub, the last people they're going to come off. Well, let me restate this: the first people they're going to react are actually watchstanders, because your offgoing watchstanders and your oncoming watchstanders are doing something. They're not in the space. They're not walking around paying attention to their equipment. So when their equipment catches on fire, right, the very first people are going to be the people in that space that are managing the equipment, and they're going to be the ones that attack. But that's a short-term thing, and they have to get relieved because they have to go back to operating the equipment, assuming it hasn't been lost. So there's a quick and immediate transition from that initial response to subsequent response. And that subsequent response should be handled by off-going awake people, that just got off watch. They're eating their meal, they're watching their movies in the rack, or they're doing maintenance, and stuff like that, non-watch standing functions. And then ultimately they will get relieved longer term by oncoming watchstanders. But that's not something we're not going to, if the day comes when we are talking about shift rotations and watch sections and stuff like that with manning your Idris and your Javelin, because persistence is a thing, man, I got it. I got this job already. I don't need it. I don't need it in my off time.
So I was going to say, you might be able to do that level of fidelity with your
NPCs.
With your
NPCs.
Yeah,
you might.
That was my thought too.
I know people have varying opinions on how effective they think NPCs will be, but at a minimum, assigning priorities, so that they rotate. They may or may not. You give them priorities, right? So it's just like Pulsar. You have like a huge laundry list of things you can prioritize for your NPC crew to do things. So it's
we talked about that briefly when we did the NPC crew asset or liability part, because you can, for those that, like Night God was saying, the sort of more simplistic functions, putting out fire, venting a room or restoring atmosphere to a room, those sorts of things. I always liken it to, I hope that having NPC crew on a larger ship, it ends up, you have some sort of system kind of like you do for colony sims, where you have, your NPCs have different traits that, their strengths, and weaknesses, what things that they're skilled at, things that they're not skilled at. And then you can prioritize them to do certain things throughout their day, based off of those traits and what you need done. And having that sort of system where, okay, in the event of X, you set this condition, and then your NPCs react to it based off of their priorities that you've given to them. And you can have them doing those more rudimentary tasks in order to keep your, as you were saying, your engineers, the higher priority people, your player characters, who know the strategy, know the systems. You can keep them unburdened with the things like putting out fires, or replacing a relay. Hey, we need this relay replaced. You go do it, and they run off and they go do it. You don't need a player doing that. You can have an NPC doing that. Those are It's a
Well, and I think that's going to be a good thing is like firefighting. If you're running 1 or 2 NPCs, firefighting is probably a perfect thing for them to do. The moment fire breaks out, they just stop doing what they're doing and they run over and they start doing it.
Yeah. That really depends on the fidelity of the AI.
Okay, well, that's always true. Yeah, that's
so I've seen their fire propagation like software. It's dynamic.
Yeah.
And
how many NPCs am I going to have to treat with burn injuries because they tried to put the fire out while standing in the fire?
There's a strategy to firefighting, and it requires some level of training. It's not, I mean, don't get me wrong. I expect in Star Citizen, it's going to be pretty much as easy as point a fucking fire extinguisher at a fire and hopefully it will go out. Or you vent the atmosphere, which I'm glad they're building that in because that's great. But, real life, like, it's all about coordinated attacking the base. The real interesting thing will be, right, is the biggest problem with fighting a fire once it grows to a certain point is you lose the ability to see. So you require thermal imaging units. We call them nifties, thermal imaging units. And basically you have a guy on the hose nozzle and then you have a guy behind him and he's the nifty operator, and the nifty operator coordinates the attack. Now, also the thing that they don't talk about with fires is not only that you can't see, it's incredibly loud. So you can't hear you either. So you have to coordinate through hand signals and touch. On like how to direct the attack. So you got one guy looking through a video screen, a thermal imaging screen, to find the base of the fire, and you got another guy right in front of him who's on the nozzle on the hose, and you have to basically coordinate through touch as if the guy on the hose is wearing, a complete blindfold to actually point the hose in the right direction and attack. So that's a higher level of coordination than I point the thing at the fire and it goes out. Now, I don't know if you'll get to that point with Star Citizen. I highly suspect not because they want to maintain the impressiveness of their visuals. But, they're going to be like, look at that fire burn. Isn't it pretty? Yeah, exactly. Look at that, guys. Gen 12. That's
no,
work.
Don't put it out. Just look at it for a minute. Just
no. Just watch it for a hot minute. It'll be great. We worked really hard on that.
Watch it for a hot minute. But Nightcap will be here all week.
That one actually was not intended, but yeah. So
those are the best puns.
That's true. But yeah, I worry though. I'm envisioning the future of AI crew members on low tick rate with fire extinguishers pointing it at the wall that's not on fire while the one behind them burns, and stuff like that. And it's just like, turn around, turn. God damn it. Did he take one of the only ones on the walls, guys? How many were there? How many fire extinguishers on board? All the NPCs have them, guys.
The fire has propagated into the next room, and he's squirting it on the already burned room.
Yeah. Wait till that moment when you're killing the NPC to take his fire extinguisher from him, and God forbid you pick it up and it's empty, and you're like, oh, do we have spares?
You now have a crime stat on your own ship from assaulting your own crew.
Your brother is always watching you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, only shoot your NPCs when you're in pyro.
Exactly. That'll be the interesting things though that happen with AI crew one day. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to theory craft too much. And I like talking about this in relation to the systems we have. I still stand by one of your best methods to fight a fire and keep it from growing out of control is going to be depressurize that space. You just have to accept the consequences that space is going to be in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
you have to have the ability to depressurize that space too, because if it's an internal compartment, you have to use your life support system to vent that space. You can't just open it to the exterior. You may, if you wanted to do that, you might have to open up a whole bunch of doors between there and an airlock. And so that's a sweet. I'll just, if you didn't vent, if you vented it beforehand, that's a great, mitigation strategy. But if you didn't, then you could be up a creek without a paddle, by taking damage to your life support system. You don't have to knock it out, but if it doesn't have the power, to do what you need to do, or it slows down its ability, you could have, fire propagating, very quickly, especially, if you have,
as it does,
casualties in terms of people, who are unable to respond to that. So, those are really good points. I very much appreciate it.
Real quick, you want to know where I think they're building the distinction, by the way, on this game? And they're advertising it in a very small way. And I don't know if they're doing it on purpose or if it's a subtle, like, kind of side effect, right? Those that are playing this game from the combat PvP oriented aspect are probably already thinking of things like, yeah, I'm gonna vent my ship and I'll be a vacuum and I'll have some oxy pens, and fire's not my problem because everybody's going to be in space gear and armor and things that are controlled internally. So I don't really give a shit about ship's atmosphere and life support nearly as much as other people do. But they've already talked about this. They've already talked about passenger missions, and the new ship from Crusader, the Spirit. Like, the executives and high value VIPs that get on board that ship, you're not going to be able to get them to wear a vac suit. That one, I don't think they're going to even program that for the AIs to do. They're just going to get on board your ship and they're going to want to sit in the nice plush chair and they're going to want to drink champagne and stuff like that. And if you get into combat, like, it's not like you're going to be able to tell that guy, put on a
Hang
vac
on,
suit.
I'm just going to go do this bounty mission real quick. Just stand by. Ah!
But that's the idea. It's not even that, right? But like, the idea would be there should be a balance on the other side of that equation. Like, I want to be the pirate contract that has to go capture, a VIP off a ship.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then you got real concerns because, like, if you start a fire on that ship, that dude's gonna burn. Unless they've got good damage control and stuff like that. Or if you get attacked and you're doing an escort, and that's the idea, right? You pick up a high value VIP.
That is totally something that I see Ninetales doing, because when they first came onto the scene, and granted they went and broke a criminal out of jail just to kill him, but that was their job, their mission that they were doing was in order to get to that guy to put him down. They had to go get him out of of jail. But that's when it comes to all these organizations and stuff, high value targets and pirates going after them, especially if you're whether you're pirates or mercenaries, you are take a mercenary job for one organization, and in order to ransom someone or weaken the competition, that's those are scenarios I totally expect to see in the verse, and to respond to.
That would be an interesting reverse bounty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it's basically
your bounty is the
player has a bounty to go kill a good guy NPC, right? Some corporate.
Yeah. Well, that's like kidnapping kind of thing. I think the kidnapping is the.
Wow. So it
they
would
showed that reputation, little guy.
But then you happen to pick this guy up, and then that generates the mission, and then off
that'd
you
be cool.
go. And then,
that'd be fun.
Unbeknownst to you, yeah,
and it queues up a bounty or a kidnapping or whatever you want to call it for criminal players.
Why is this personnel transport mission rated as high risk and pay out so well? Oh, I'm going to do this. And, oh wait, it's because that person is, that's a tangent, but
to other people, But ultimately, my point is, right, they're building the function in of NPCs getting on ships, and ultimately, I know at first, it's not like you're going to be able to tell the NPC, my standard is when you get on board my vessel, you will be in combat armor and or a flight suit with a helmet at all times, because I don't believe in having atmosphere in flight. Like, you can't just say that to an NPC and just expect them to do that. They're going to just be on your ship, and if you want to escort them from one place to the other, you have now, just by default,
I paid for luxury accommodations and comfortable transport, and
it's just, even just the limitations of the code and the interaction that I expect. I just, like, you accept that you go to Orison to pick up 4 passengers, in whatever ship you took, and then you have to go somewhere. Bottom line is, whatever compartments they go into have to have atmosphere, because otherwise you're going to take off and they die, and then it's like, well, that's a fail. It's because I rigged for my standard. I don't want fire. So that's what I expect. I expect you're going to have a reason, and that's what I think players kind of get wrapped around, is like, well, why would I ever just use the life support system to supply oxygen? I fly in armor all the time. You're not
going to be able to fly in armor all the time, though.
Granted.
Light armor is probably the most you'll ever be able to fly routinely. and I think they've talked about even that.
You'll
having
have
some type of-
reasons for not wearing an armor
Yeah.
and a full suit. I'm a lot of sci-fi franchises talk about having like a little mask that you wear, and an emergency mask with an emergency air canister that you can wear long, hook it onto your face, and you can wear that long enough in order to get to where the suit storage is.
Yeah.
Well,
Is
Atira,
there
I know we've
anything
been.
else you? No, what's up? I was
Oh,
going
I
to
was
ask him
gonna
if
say.
there's anything else he wants to say about damage control.
Oh yeah, and then I was going to ask you if you had
Words of
anything you wanted to
wisdom.
add.
I'll offer this. Most damage control is heavily relied upon somebody taking charge of the effort and coordinating the attack. And then there's a communication piece of that person to the ship control party. So in this case, I would say the captain and the pilot being the key players that need to be aware of whatever damage control efforts, what efforts are in progress, what actions have been taken, what actions need to be taken, and then also crucially, what systems are compromised and or returned.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not just that the man in charge is down there like, okay, you do this, you do that, you do this, and stuff like that. They have to have their own list of priorities in their head. Like I said, they've got to know, okay, I need electrical power back, I need cooling, and then I need life support, and then I got to get the pilot and the co-pilot, or ensure. Maybe it's just ensuring, or maximizing. I got to maximize propulsion for the ship. Restore as many thrusters as I can achieve, or maybe it's, all right, let's start with the mains, then the retros, and then it's maneuvering. I can go forward or I can stop. I can kill flight, and then it's, maneuvering thrusters in a controlled fashion. And they have to have that priority list down, and they have to communicate what they need and or what they're providing to the captain and the pilot. And most casualties live or die based on that communication between the man in charge at the scene and the ship control party. So if you got a good engineer, I would make sure that they're trained and they're ready to step up, take charge, and make sure you don't have a bunch of chiefs. You got a few Indians that are just ready to take orders and do what the engineer says, because the engineer should know best. And a good captain and or pilot that can also coordinate with that person to communicate. Maybe there is a change in priority based on the condition of the ship.
Yeah, the Captain Kirk asking Scotty what's possible, what can we do, what are our options.
Yep.
And I don't want to go into it because we could theory craft about it, but it just you bringing that up, it makes me very curious about how they will go about displaying ship status, in regards to damage control, for the engineer, the person who is leading your damage control efforts, being able to visualize those things for them to do their job with what they've built for building blocks. I think that could, I look forward to seeing that screenshot of those systems and how they display it in order for, the wannabe Scotties of the Star Citizen verse to be able to do what you're talking about, because it's not going to be something, simplistic and bland. It's going to be a, multifaceted system that looks just incredibly epic. And so I'm looking forward to that.
We hope.
Before
Me too.
Yeah, I do too. We're just past the 2-hour mark, and this second segment, Atira and I have been asking Nightcobb questions, and we've been, feeding off of what he, the advice and the experience that he has. I don't have anything to add. Atira, if you had anything else you wanted to add from your experience, as a tanker or an officer being in a leadership position, feel free. But otherwise, I think this has been a really productive discussion on both topics. Been very interesting and illuminating.
I think our esteemed non-commissioned officer, senior non-commissioned officer, has covered everything.
Yeah, gunning for promotion. Yep, I like it.
Working on it.
It's gonna happen. We're pulling for you.
I just want to become my favorite Halo character. That's all.
Well, yeah. Gosh,
Yeah.
I've seen some Master Chiefs out there that do not do the your favorite Halo character any favors.
You're not wrong. Well, I'm not much better. The saying in the Navy is senior chiefs are the least trustworthy because they're even numbered, and you're the only even numbered style of chief because you're E8 instead of E7 or 9.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to get trustworthy again.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. We could take you
sense.
the other way too.
No.
Shady AF.
He's like, no.
No.
No, I'm good.
Forward progression.
It's been very interesting listening to Night Cobb preach to us on damage control.
I appreciate. I walked away with some great terminology. Fatal funnel. I remembered it that time.
I know all about like damage control surgery, and that's a thing. But
oh man, I meant to tell you,
we do things that are similar.
You put a bug in my head. I fly a lot. I travel.
I do too, unfortunately.
My current shore duty. Well, you were talking about, to say the least, flight paramedic. Yeah. But you were talking
getting
about,
to work. I live in Idaho, but I work in New Mexico. So.
Oh, gotcha. But you were talking the other day on one of your streams about the natures of being a paramedic in flight and like the whole different environment that brings with regards to, were you talking about air embolisms? Or what were you talking about? It had to do with air density.
Mm-hmm.
Air density.
Yeah.
And I was listening to that and go ahead. Sorry.
Sick people do not do well with significant changes in altitude and air density. It's a huge thing. Where I work, my base is at like 3,500 feet, but to go to Albuquerque or El Paso, we generally have to fly over 8,000 feet, sometimes higher, if we've got like mountain obscuration. That's a huge change in air density, and for people who are struggling to maintain oxygenation, it presents a significant challenge. And you're like, oh, well, you can just give them more oxygen. I can only carry so much oxygen on my aircraft, and I've got an 1.5 hour long flight time. These are logistical challenges that most people don't think about. Because they're like, oh, just you throw them in the ambulance and you be at the hospital in 5 minutes. It doesn't work like that in much of the world, and that's entirely what my job is. And Star Citizen is recreating that, whether people are aware of it or not. But that's another topic for another day, and I'm actually going to do that video eventually. But this has also been fun and productive because boarding actions is going to be my next short form video. It got voted on by my YouTube community as the next one that they wanted to see me do a video on following the next great capital ship. So this discussion has been very productive and helpful, and I've taken my own notes. But if you guys don't have anything else, I think this is a good spot to wrap it up, especially because we're right at about 2 hours and 15 minutes, and each section is really just about 2 hours. So that's what we're going for. We haven't had an episode in a while, and look at us. We stayed on track. We stayed on time.
No.
We're professionals.
I'm just really upset, Tree, because I didn't get to pick on a tier very much.
We've been doing that. We've been doing that offline a lot, though.
You think it'll stop me? I will kick you when you're down.
Jeez.
Yeah, every predator goes for the weak prey. You don't want to attack the. Yeah. Oh, geez.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
he looks great though. I like the glasses.
You do look very intelligent.
Blue light
nerd shirt on too.
It's blue light filtration there.
Mm-hmm.
Got a big monitor.
That's so you can go to sleep later easily.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, got to get in bed.
For everybody who's hanging out with us in chat, and I'm going to butcher the name again. We are going to raid somebody. I actually need to pull that up, but I forget the name of the guy from your org who's hanging out with us. I just want to say thank you for reminding me to change over the episode information. I wish I had done that sooner. We probably would have had more people hanging out, but that's okay. But again, for all of you guys who've been
that mildly successful YouTube video where he was running the Corsair through the snake pit.
Oh, nice. I'll have to check that
Yeah,
out.
that was Drew.
I have not posted my own yet.
Drew, if I don't know if you saw, but you got some positive comments on your piloting skills for that.
And the rest of us just crashed and were
Yeah.
idiots.
Yeah, Tira didn't get any positive comments because
No.
everybody knows that he was flying the Pisces that exploded to my right.
It was
halfway
so
down
bad.
the track. Yeah,
The racing
flew right into the
videos
ground.
are going to be epic. It's going to be like watching the highlight reel of all the crashes in
I can't wait.
NASCAR. It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
But if you're still hanging out with us in chat or you've been with us, I want to say thank you for hanging out with us. And if you caught the ads, I appreciate you suffering through them because that helps support stackup.org. Again, all my content, all monetization goes towards supporting stackup.org. So if you, I appreciate the follows. If you choose to subscribe, we really appreciate that. If you want to donate directly, you can do that on Twitch. And then if you're watching this later on YouTube, again, please consider giving a like and a subscribe, leaving a comment. Let us know what your thoughts are on what we've been talking about. We want to hear them. I read and every comment and I respond to most of them. Night Cobb and Atira, check out the comment section as well.
That's a lie. We read the comments for him. He can't read. Don't lie to people.
Well, I mean, that's why we have Discord.
Not reading those.
We
read them for him. It's fine.
Yes. If you want to chat with us directly, you can hop in my Discord. We're always in there chatting and stuff. We've got a special section for this podcast to talk about the episodes. And if you have suggestions of things you'd like us to talk about and cover in the future, let us know. Hop in my Discord, or you can leave a comment in the comments. And check out these guys. They have their own content. All the links are going to be in the description below, and you can check them out. I just want to say thanks, and thanks guys for making this work. We have very interesting schedules, and so finding the time to chat for 2 hours is a challenge, but I really appreciate it, and I always enjoy these. Hopefully we can make a game night work maybe on Saturday or something like that, or coming up, where we can all hop in together and have some in-game shenanigans and not have to, do big brain stuff like talk about boarding and damage control and, just go pew pew or whatever.
Yeah.
But, I'm down.
I am too. Yeah. I'm around this weekend.
Sweet. We'll plan on it, and then we'll discuss a time. I'll put out an event notice and we'll go forth and conquer. But that's all we have for this evening. And thanks again, everybody. 07. Have a good night.